Okay, so if you've ever started a project on Azure, you know exactly how it goes, right? It's so easy to just spin something up. But what happens when that quick little project suddenly becomes the backbone of your entire business? Yeah, that initial simplicity, it can turn into a massive headache really fast. Today, we're going to break down how to build your Azure setup for the long haul so you don't get trapped by your own success. All right, here's the game plan. We're going to start with this weird paradox right at the heart of Azure. Then we'll look at the traps it sets for so many people. After that, we'll build our way out, piece by piece, looking at the right building blocks, a pro-level blueprint, and, of course, how this all helps you control costs. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with how to really future-proof your setup. Okay, let's dive right into the heart of the problem. I like to call it Azure's subscription paradox. And it really is this bizarre conflict where the path Azure encourages you to take when you start is the complete opposite of the path you need to be on to succeed at scale. It's kind of wild when you think about it. And you know what? This quote from Dror Asaf absolutely nails it. He points out that Microsoft's own best practice guides for enterprises are all about using multiple subscriptions for things like security and cost control. But their get started quick experience, it pushes everyone toward a single one. That's a huge disconnect, right? And this really highlights the two completely different mindsets. On one hand, you've got the startup way of thinking. One subscription, deploy everything, go, go, go. And look, that makes total sense when you're just starting out. But on the other hand, you have the enterprise reality. Here, subscriptions become these hard, necessary boundaries, walls between your environments, your workloads, your billing. It's not about slowing down. It's about being smart and staying in control. And this leads us straight into what I call the single subscription trap. Because that initial simplicity, oh, it's so seductive. But trust me, it comes with some serious hidden costs that only pop up later, usually when you're starting to scale and the pressure is really on. So, scaling pain number one, resource limit collisions. Just picture this for a second. Your dev team is running some huge test, spinning up a ton of powerful VMs. Then, out of nowhere, your production deployment fails. Just completely fails. Why? Well, it's because the dev test ate up all the vCPU quota for the entire subscription. Production is literally starved of resources. When everybody's playing in the same sandbox, you're bound to get sand in your eyes. Next up, pain number two, permission sprawl. And this one is a security nightmare. See, in a single subscription, it's just way too easy to give someone access to, well, everything. A developer just needs to tweak something in a staging database and boom, suddenly they can also see, or worse, change production resources. Trying to enforce the principle of least privilege? Forget about it. It becomes nearly impossible. And the third major pain point is what I call testing blindness. Your deployment scripts? They work perfectly, flawlessly, in that single subscription you've always had. But then comes the day you have to expand. You need a multi-subscription model for a new product, a new region. And what happens? Everything breaks. All those scripts just shatter. Why? Because they were never, ever tested against the reality of deploying across subscription boundaries. And that introduces a whole new layer of complexity you were totally unprepared for. Okay, so we've definitely seen the problems. It's a bit grim, I know. But now let's talk about the solution. To do this right, we have to start with the fundamentals, the actual building blocks you need for a scalable Azure environment. And really, it all comes down to understanding the hierarchy. Probably the best way to get your head around this is to think of it like a company's org chart. Seriously. Right at the very top, you have your Azure AD tenant. That's the whole global corporation, the single source for all your identities. Then, just below that, you have management groups. Think of these as your major divisions, like North America or EMEA. These are great for applying policies to huge chunks of your org. Then you have subscriptions. These are like your individual departments, R&D, sales, finance. And finally, at the bottom, you have resource groups. Those are your project teams working within a department. Now, this whole structure runs on a few really important rules. The main one, think of it like gravity. Policies, permissions, rules, they all flow down from the top. So a policy you apply at that division level automatically gets inherited by every department underneath it. It's an incredibly powerful way to enforce standards everywhere. And just like a real org chart, everything can only report to one boss, one parent. A big pro tip here, keep this hierarchy as flat as you can. No more than 4 levels, seriously. Any deeper and things can get complicated fast. All right, we've got our building blocks, we understand the hierarchy. Now let's put them all together. Let's build the architectural pattern that actually solves all those nasty problems we talked about earlier.
And that, my friends, is the Azure Landing Zone Blueprint. So what exactly is an Azure Landing Zone? Well, think of it as a perfectly prepared, pre-configured environment. It's not just some random folder where you dump your stuff. No, it's a whole framework built on that hierarchy we just covered. What it really means is that any new application you deploy automatically lands in a place that is safe, compliant, and ready to scale right from day one. And here it is. This is the master blueprint. This comes straight from Microsoft's own cloud adoption framework. And yeah, I know, it looks like a lot at first glance, right? It can be a little intimidating. But trust me, this structure is the absolute key to getting clarity and control. So let's break down what's actually going on here.
Okay, let's just walk through the big pieces. See that platform group? That's for all your shared services, the plumbing, like networking and identity that everyone needs. Then you have the landing zones group. This is where your actual applications live. And you can see they're neatly separated by environment. Prod, non-prod, dev, you name it. Then there's Sandbox. This one is so critical. It's an isolated playground for developers to experiment and learn, but with really strict cost control so things don't get out of hand. And finally, Decommissioned is exactly what it sounds like, a holding area for old stuff you're about to retire.
But look, this architecture, it's not just some technical exercise for the sake of it. It's real power. The real reason you do this is the business value it unlocks. And that comes in the form of amazing governance and incredibly precise cost control. Now, when we talk about governance, there are two tools that people mix up all the time: role-based access control, or RBAC, and Azure policy. So let's clear this up right now. RBAC is all about who. It controls which people or which users can do things. Azure policy, on the other hand, is all about what. It controls what kind of resources can be deployed and enforces rules on them, like, hey, you can only deploy resources in this specific region. And when it comes to financial control, this structure is an absolute game changer. All of a sudden, you have crystal clear cost centers because your subscriptions line up with your departments. You can use Azure policy to enforce mandatory tagging, which means you finally know exactly which team is spending what. You can even do cool things like tag inheritance, so nothing slips through the cracks. This is how you get to real, actual financial accountability in the cloud. And the impact of this? It is massive. We are not talking about pocket change here. Get this. Studies have shown that organizations who actually implement a proper landing zone and good governance can cut their cloud spend by 25 to 30%. Let that sink in. 25 to 30%. That is real money, saved simply by getting rid of waste and making sure every single dollar is accounted for. Okay, let's start to bring this all home. The real shift in thinking that we're talking about here is moving away from seeing your cloud setup as some temporary thing, and instead thinking about building a permanent, solid foundation for your company's entire future in the cloud. You know, it's so tempting to just say, we'll fix this later, we're too busy right now. But waiting has a very real cost. I call it the learning curve tax or the infrastructure tax. Every single week, your best, most expensive engineers spend untangling this kind of mess. That is a week they are not shipping features that actually make your business money. And this brings us right back full circle to that initial paradox, that single subscription getting started experience. It isn't necessarily wrong for day one, but as Dror Asaf puts it so well, it's critically incomplete. It just doesn't prepare you for what comes next. The real key here is to start with the end in mind. So if you take away just one thing from all this, let it be this. Thinking about structure early is not enterprise bureaucracy. It is the exact opposite. It's a strategic necessity that actually enables you to move faster and safer down the road. The smartest move you can make is to plan your multi-subscription architecture right from the beginning, even if you only implement a tiny piece of it to start. And that really brings us to the final and I think most crucial question you need to ask yourself. When you really look at your own cloud setup today, is it built on a foundation of sand, just waiting to crumble under pressure? Or is it built on solid stone, ready to support whatever amazing thing you're going to build next?